It's 5 o'clock. Good evening, members, and welcome to the Joint Transportation Board meeting. Before we start on the agenda, may I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated to enable Mr. Bailey to assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Today's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending recording these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask the question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and other members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. You'll note there's a new face sitting on my right. This will be our and your new clerk. She's very well known to Maidstone members in her 2-week old position. She's not certainly known to many county members. She has a most wonderful Christian name, which I've never heard of in my life. Easy or something. Is it Easy or Esmeralda? It's Esmeralda, but she doesn't sign her name as Esmeralda. Right. What have you got for apologies? Well, I've got a copy. Councillor Whittle, Councillor Cook, the leader of Kent County Council, Mr. Sams, Councillor Sams has informed Democratic Services, I can't actually see him here, that he'll be leaving about 6:15 to 6:20. Well, if he comes, he ain't going to be here very long. Any other apologies? Substitute members? Councillor English?
As Councillor Wilby is not yet here, I will substitute for him while he isn't. If he turns up, I'll become a visiting.
Thank you for that. Any visiting members? Can't see any. Members and officers, are there any disclosures by members or officers? Disclosures of lobbying? Agenda item 6 is to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. There are no part 2 items on the agenda, so all items will be taken in public. Agenda item 7, on pages 1 to 7, are the minutes of our meeting on the 21st of March. You've got 7 pages of pretty accurate recording, I thought. All in favour? Thank you. Agenda item 8, there are no petitions. Oh, hello.
You had a date or any response from Arriva on their answers?
Sorry, I haven't. I wouldn't expect Arriva to act that quickly, but I'll ask our clerk. No, but we will chase them up.
Yeah, brilliant. And could you come back to the members with what their response is on?
Yeah, that would. Sorry. Good. Okay. There are no petitions. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. Item in the minutes, agenda item 48, Leeds Langley Relief Road, because we had such an awfully long meeting last time, that was resolved to have it at the next board meeting, but it's not on tonight's agenda. So will it be on? When will it be on the agenda?
Well, I'm going to look at the county officer. So far as I'm aware, there's no further massive new information because I've asked for it before, but you may have more info than I have.
Well, the reason why it was withdrawn from this evening's agenda is that we are, of course, in the PERDA period, and the advice was that we should not discuss that item at this time.
That's a standard response. I mean, I can remember being told that, but Mr. Hodson doesn't always listen to people from above. I wanted a paper to come if indeed there was a paper with some soundness in it. And I think at this moment in time, I'm not so sure that members would have been able to go away with any more positive information. But be assured, I'm sure it will be on the agenda at the first meeting after. Mr. Cumming?
No, thank you, Chairman. One minor point. At the top of page 5, I said that the complaints were being dealt with in Bedford, not Luton. First word on page 5.
Yeah, got it.
Should be Bedford.
I understand. It will be amended. Councillor Burton?
Thank you, Chairman. Don't want to dwell on that point that was being previously made, but I am surprised there's nothing substantive for JTB to consider on the subject of Leeds Langley, given the recent press coverage where you have the head of Kent Highways actually announcing consultation on the matter later in the year, and that's prior to anything coming to this board. So can we have that firmly noted that there will be an update of explanation on that matter?
I think that's sound and fair, and as a Maidstone member will be sitting here at the next meeting, this meeting, and it may well be, I don't know who's ever going to be chairman of your in-house committee, we'll see to it that that is on the agenda. Now going to try and get on with agenda item 8. There are no petitions on the agenda today. Agenda item 9, there are no questions or statements from members of the public on the agenda today. Agenda item 10, no petitions have been submitted to Kent Highway Services. And then we were going on to amendments to the Joint Transportation Board. With your agreement, I'm going to swap the two items around. There's a gentleman sitting in the audience who sat here for 2 3/4 hours at the last meeting, and sadly his item, plus 2 others, had to be delayed, and I didn't think that was fair that he should sit here for 1 minute longer than he has to. So can we swap them around and go for A boards rather than the agreement? Good, and a lovely smile on that gentleman's face. Right, just by way of an intro, I know we've got a paper on that, but in more recent times, this week, Mr. English, and it's been supported by other Maidstone members today, sent myself and the Vice Chairman some notes from the gentleman sitting in the audience read this subject, and also some photographs. And I have to say that those notes were excellent in detail and clarity, and the officers who are going to present this paper, one from Kent County Council, one from Maidstone Borough Council, have now seen those notes and indeed the photographs. And I'm sure it will help them in whatever work takes place in the coming weeks and months. So, I'm going to ask the county officer, first of all, to lead into this paper, Mrs. Rapport, and then it will be from Maidstone Borough Council, Mr. Edwards. So, off with the county officer first.
Thank you. We were asked to look at A-boards on the public highway following a request from the One Maidstone Streets Scene Committee, at which John Edwards and I are both members. We've looked at the policy that's adopted by Kent County Council to see whether that needs any changing. But as a first thought, we'd actually go into the town centre to actually see if we can take some action on a soft approach, not upsetting the businesses, but actually trying to work with the business to see if we could resolve the issue. The current arrangement is that businesses do not need a licence, but do need to agree to the requirements set out by Kent County Council. Basically, all businesses are entitled to one A-board for their premises, unless they actually back onto 2 streets if they're on a corner location, in which case 2 boards can be considered. The idea is that we're trying to encourage the businesses to use other methods of advertising, i.e. their shop window, perhaps flags raised quite high above the frontages of their shops, window boxes, all of that sort of banners in their window, that type of thing, rather than the A-boards. We've been very lucky in working with a lady in Maidstone that is partially sighted, and she's been very helpful and proactive with us in gathering lots of information together, identifying who the main offenders are in the town, so that we can actually take forward our enforcement of the abled in the town centre. So with that in mind, we've actually set up an enforcement day working collaboratively with Maidstone Borough Council, and that's going to take place on the 8th of June. It will be, as I said, a soft approach of us walking through the town, visiting the businesses, advising them of why we're there, what dangers they pose to people that with disabilities and with sight problems, and also asking for their cooperation in reducing the number of boards. We also will be asking for the boards that don't comply to the standards height and width restriction to be removed, and we will give notice on those businesses to remove them or have them altered to a smaller board. Obviously, in the first visit, we need to encourage business rather than, we don't want to be seen that we are actually enforcing, although we are calling it a joint enforcement day. We do want to actually encourage the business and not detract from their selling. So that's why we're trying to do it as a very softly approach through the town. It will take place, as I say, on the 8th of April. We will be going in, seeing if we can clear as much as we can. As you say, Chairman, the photographs supporting it that have been given to me today by Councillor English, with the photographs added to that, are very helpful for the case that we're putting forward to present it. As a side to that, we are also working with Maidstone Borough Council to actually get the policy document updated slightly, and we will be asking Matthew Balfour at some time to countersign the new process document that we put forward. It just needs tweaking in a couple of areas where it's a little bit bureaucratic at the moment. We will try and make it a little bit more simpler to shopkeepers so they're able to sign it more easily. John, did you want to add anything further to it?
Yes, please. There we go. Just to add to what Sue has said, what we'd be looking for is, after the 8th, is for us as a borough, because we have more resources in the town to monitor the A-board usage. We're looking at a streamlined approach that we can take when there are constantly businesses offending. Agree, yeah, absolutely, it's going to be softly, make people aware of the rules, but probably then use a 1 warning, 2 warning, we remove your A-board process as well. So there's a little bit of teeth to what we're doing, and so the current policy does need a little bit of streamlining. We'll work together to do that. But, I think we do need to say there's not a huge problem out there. There is some persistent businesses who is very annoying. It's also important to state we will be working with the Independent Trade Society, Ivan White's group, to working with those small businesses, because we have to understand that the A-boards are there for a reason, and some of these small companies do rely on these for business. So softly approach. There is a little bit of teeth to it at the end, but after the 8th of June, well, I pretty much see that us, Maidstone Borough Council, will be running with this for a much longer period.
Who want to speak, whatever happens, I think that you ought to pencil in your diaries a progress report for some time in the next municipal year. I think that might be helpful. I have Councillor Clark first.
Thank you, Chairman. My question to the officers is, clearly you're looking at the policy and you're looking to update it, but it's an opportunity on the 8th of June, and it may be going forward, to have a very, very simple A4, almost like a quick reference guide that will just give the highlights of the policy. For instance, if you've got a small pavement outside of your business and you put an A-board there because you feel you've got the right to have an A-board on the roadside, that can significantly reduce the access on that small pavement. Whereas if you're in something like Week Street, you could put it a metre away from your property and there's plenty of room to get around it. And I just wonder if you could sort of just boil down the really important points to something very simple, hand it to the businesses, put it online, and then, because I just don't think they're going to go to a link that will be an onerous document online.
Yeah, we will actually be preparing a pack type thing that we can hand out and we can leave to people, because obviously they will be conducting their business, so we will be coming unannounced to them. So we've got to give them the opportunity to digest it and have a look at the information we're giving. If they're obviously keen to speak to us on the day, we will be there. We'll have 3 enforcement officers also with us that can give them the sections of the law and the Act that we're working under. But yes, certainly we will be handing out a pack to them with the salient information on it. Yes, certainly.
Councillor English?
Just to add to that, a simplified summary of the rules, absolutely, but we'll be able to offer advice as well. Some people have a bit of private frontage, they're entitled to do that. So not only will be rules, there will also be a group of us there to offer advice to any shop owner.
And in many languages. Councillor English.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's very encouraging to see that progress is definitely being made on this vexed subject. As some members will know, and officers, I am a member of the board of One Maidstone, so I certainly don't want to see an approach taken which is harsh and inappropriate for local businesses. And certainly we've learned lessons over the years as a borough council that when you start enforcing something that has been maybe lapsed for a while, but the last thing you want to do is go in heavy-handed on the first day, and that the best thing is to try and get as many people on board as possible and to educate those people to best process and dealing with things in the most appropriate manner. Most people do not offend against common sense or because they're being deliberately malign. It is because they are not necessarily aware of the consequences of their actions on other people. Having said that, though, there are a few persistent offenders in Maidstone who are only too aware of their sins and transgressions, to put it that way in a topical language maybe. I won't single out in public a particular bar in Maidstone, which I mentioned earlier, but when a member of the community raised with them the extremely excessive number of A-boards that they had on display, the reaction to that complaint was a stream of vitriol, which was basically a hate crime because of its attitude towards people who dared raise a complaint. We have to bear in mind that, yes, by all means adopt a softly approach, get as many people on board, taking account of the interests of businesses as well as members of the public. But there will be a need at some point to take enforcement action against a few of the more persistent offenders, but we'll be in a stronger position if we've done all the other things first, of course. Thank you very much, members and officers, for all the work you've done on this to get us to a position where it looks like we can go forward.
Good. Okay, sound points there. Mr. Bird's next.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points. Firstly, I'd like some clarification on the insurance issue, please. If a pedestrian or other road user were to trip on an A-board or other obstruction on the pavement, do they have responsibility for any damages to the person? I think that needs to be very clear, and I think it needs to be very clear to the retailer or whoever. The other point I want to raise, we talk a lot about A-boards, but we don't talk about all the other clutter that's put on the pavement. There are certain retailers that put half the contents of their shop on the pavement on a regular basis, and these are just as awkward trip hazards as A-boards. So I do hope that we will extend our policing to, or enforcement to cover what is appropriate. And I know of some shops also where they may bring the produce back into the shop, but they leave the framework outside overnight in the dark or the half-light, which is an even worse trip hazard. Thank you.
Right, referring to the policy that each shop holder has to sign and return back, and it's held on folder for them. It says A-boards will be the owner's responsibility when placed on the highway, and the local authority will not be liable for any damage or injury caused to highway users. The owner should hold public liability insurance to indemnify the Kent County Council up to the value of £5 million against any liability, loss or damage, claim or proceeding whatsoever arising under statute or common law in respect of placing of temporary obstructions on the highway or their removal therefrom. With regard to the second point of other things being sold or stacked out on the highway, they will be addressed as part of this campaign as well at the same time. It would be very sort of short-sighted of us not to mention it at the same time of us going into the shops.
Your little note that's going round to all the businesses ought to have that insurance one underlined in red, and 5 million arrowed. That might be a preventive in itself. We wanted to come back, Mr. Burt.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm very reassured by that. The fact that KCC is... Beg your pardon. The fact that KCC is indemnified, does that mean that KCC will handle claims by anybody who is injured?
The claims will go to the shop holder.
So it would be going through the small claims court and all the usual rigmarole that the poor injured individual will find pretty difficult.
Well, that would have to be judged, wouldn't it? I see where you're coming from, but it depends that the individual may treat it as seriously as it is, and whether it's small claims or depending on the amount of claim. I see the point, but the answer is that the policy states, and the policy state, it's the individual shop owner's responsibility. Mr. Chittenden next.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to support the officer's approach to what they're doing and the updating, of course, of the document. When it first came out, I was involved with the document in getting it in place, and of course it's a policy that's for the whole of Kent, but it started off because of the problems we were having in Maidstone at the time. They were far more serious than what we've got. Sorry, they were far more serious than what we've got now. My concern is that when it first came out, we used it and it did the trick. What I was concerned with is it's some 5 or 6 years now since we've actually, really, it's come off the shelf. It hasn't come off the shelf. I don't know if it's come off, if it's being used anywhere else. I don't think it's been used in Maidstone. So what I'm hoping is once we've done the current inspections, once we've got the updates, that perhaps we can have at least, say, once a year inspections to make sure that they are keeping to the word, if you like, because otherwise we do know things go back. But yeah, I like the approach, and well done. Thank you.
Councillor Daly.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think we're witnessing something called a perennial return visit. I can't tell you the number of times I've sat in these fora talking about A-boards. Certainly since I had curly hair, I know. And this is one that comes back and back and back. We're talking about obstructions of the highway, of the footway. And we're talking about things which are a nuisance to people who are less than well-sighted, whether they're blind or partially sighted. We're talking about people who are these days confined to electric buggies, if you like. And all these things, and this is the first time, I have to say, that I've heard that they have a right to put them there. I thought it was a kind of a privilege, or they had an arrangement of some sort. I'm surprised they didn't have to pay a fee, but anyway. But they are a nuisance, there's no doubt about it, because they do clutter up the pavements. And I have seen people with guide dogs, for example, who are, okay, they can negotiate it because the guide dog will help them. But there are other people walking with sticks and who are partially sighted who do have a problem. And there's no doubt about it. My own view, I mean, my personal view is I think they should be banned, quite frankly. I don't think there should be a right. I think the pavement should be clear for people to walk on and to drive their buggies on and to push their pushchairs on and do all the other things. And I also see, I know we've got a cafe culture now, but I mean, it might be all right in Nice or wherever to sit out on the pavement and drink your coffee, and even in, shall we say, Earl Street, where it's a sort of a cafe culture. But really in the High Street and various other parts, I really see that it is just clutter, and it's a great shame. I don't know what we can do. I don't think we probably can do anything about it. Mrs. Laporte tells us it's in statute, so they've got a right to do it. But they haven't got a right to be a nuisance.
Point made. Mr. Willis, I see your hands trembling.
Well, might get hit in a minute, but if Councillor Day doesn't get re-elected and that's his last speech, that'd be very miserable, wouldn't it?
I think we've had good debate, and it all stems in part from Mr. Lever. And we're indebted to you, Mr. Lever, and your partner in crime who's sitting next to you, who puts the photographs together and helps you with the notes. They were very clear. They will be helpful for officers. You've actually, as you asked me before the meeting started, got a date, the 8th of June. When the process will commence. That doesn't mean it will be finished. It's a big town. So let's see what goes on. I think we've all agreed that during the course of the next municipal year, the matter will come back for updating. You're a real supporter of watching what goes on at these meetings, so I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. So I hope in some small way you're satisfied. And again, I apologise on behalf of the committee, but really me, that you sat for 2 3/4 hours last time we met, and then you had to go without being listened to. So, members, we're happy with what's happening in the main. So let's see what happens in the future. It isn't an easy subject on both fronts. So we'll go back to the Transportation Board agreement, which you have before you. Again, it's taken a while to come back. This board agreed several months ago at the request of CALC and other members that their representation should go up from 1 to 2, but also with voting rights. And the agreement has been looked at by both legal departments of county and borough. They've made the major amendment. I think they've made 1 or 2 tiny other amendments which were necessitated by the new councillor constitution system set up by Maidstone Borough Council in recent times. But what you have before you is a document which will now enable CALC from the date when this date is inserted in the engrossed document for them to have 2 members and to vote and to partake perhaps even more fully than they do at this moment in time. So unless you've got any comments on this document, there is one, and I'm very cross that Maidstone members haven't brought it to my attention. Maidstone Borough Council is no longer at London House, as shown in the papers. It moved some while ago to Maidstone House. So that's the only amendment as I can see. Are we all happy? Councillor Byrne.
Sorry, Chairman. I want to come back to this issue, which I know we've corresponded on by email, relating to agenda setting. And I would like to repeat the minutes of the meeting of the 3rd of September 2014. It was resolved that in future, political group spokespersons from each partner authority, one from each political group from each authority as appropriate, and the CALC representative should be invited to attend the agenda-setting meetings. Now, I am not aware of any resolution by this Joint Transportation Board to rescind that resolution. So I would like to see that incorporated in here, please.
Well, I think since 2014, nobody's asked to sit on such a setup until very, very recent times. So 2014 passed, 2015 passed, 2016 passed, and we're now in 2017. From the chair, and there will be a new chair next year, I'm not proposing to delay the production of this new agreement, which has taken 6 months to get here, and which was specifically for one purpose, i.e. for the benefit of CALC membership. Those are my views. Councillor English, Councillor Burton.
I take on board what County Councillor Bird is saying, but I think the two things are different because on the one hand we've got an agreement between essentially three tiers of local government on constitutional matters, and the fundamental question of representation and voting rights should be in a joint agreement. Who gets invited to the agenda setting is more a matter of convention and for each committee for the committee to decide in any year. I wouldn't have thought it was appropriate to mix the two. However, I do think that the issue of who should be invited to agenda setting issues should be revised. And in the absence of a contrary decision, I would strongly recommend that an incoming chairman, probably would be Councillor Burton, but let's not tempt fate, acts on the supposition that that resolution is in force until repealed. And that would be the appropriate thing to do. But I think it is separate to the constitutional issue.
Agree on that point. The second point has some substance, but the first point is absolutely correct. It is not a matter of relevance to the constitution of this document. Councillor Burton was next, then I have Councillor Chipman.
I'd like to just try and keep this really simple. I think the agreement in front of us is what we've waited for a very long time to bring us to a current position. I take on board what Councillor English has just said. I think there's a very easy mechanism to resolve that moving forwards. This agreement will give us the basis to do that, and I would like to move the recommendation per the papers that we adopt.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't object to leaving the Constitution as it is, as long as we sort out the problems we have had over the last 2 or 3 years. And we probably let it run too long. I can remember one year, I think 3 meetings were cancelled. What it proved, Chairman, is that either we hold an agenda meeting with proper representation, or we ask the members if they've got items. There are certainly items that members want to discuss and be brought to the committee. And so I think in the new term, if you like, we've got to make sure there is a procedure for getting those items onto the agenda. I do accept last time you got flooded with a lot and there was too many on it, and probably actually 2 or 3 of them we could have pulled out and actually dealt with outside in any case. but I did understand what was going on last time. But I do strongly suggest we've got to come up with something based on what we said in 2014, which seems to have been forgotten, but rightfully raised by Councillor Bird. And I think we've got to make sure that there is a procedure put in place by the officers and whoever is chairman and vice chairman to ensure that we do bring the items fully and properly to the agenda, Chairman.
And I certainly back to the hilt your last sentence there, that you bring items of concern and brought up to the committee. However, you've heard from Councillor with regards Burton, with regards to the future, and his proposal was seconded. I'm just going to allow Councillor Willis to have a word.
Could be an appropriate amendment or not, and I'm going to ask the question of other people to judge. The Highways Agency. Now, we have people here from Kent Highways, is that correct? Which is brilliant. But we always bring up the subject of the Highways Agency in certain forums and never seem to get the responses we want. I'll give the example of the park and ride boards that I think are still up on the M20, where there's no park and ride. Is it possible we could discuss in the appropriate forum, perhaps the next meeting, whether we could add the Highways Agency to our invited guests? It's a question, not a demand.
Well, it's noted, and that question will be put to whoever's chairperson next year for an item for discussion. Okay, happy with that? Right, members, are we happy to proceed with the proposal from Councillor Burton, seconded, that we proceed with the paper which is before us now, and we've had some, not interjections, some comments, some sound comments of the way forward next year? Yeah? Good. Which is to do, and this was a catch-up as well, which we had to delay, and that's agenda item 13, the A20 through Harwich update. The gentleman from Harwich who was going to be here and then go isn't here, but I think it stemmed from him originally. What's the latest on that front?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this item relates to a scheme of road improvements on the A20 that are required to support new housing developments in Harwich. The proposals involve the narrowing of the carriageway, the lowering of the speed limit from 40 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour, and the provision of new sections of footway and pedestrian crossing facilities. An outline scheme design commissioned by Maidstone Borough Council has provided a basis for securing financial contributions via Section 106 agreements from the various housing developments in the village. Payment of the contributions is tied to the occupation of the developments, which are currently at varying stages of construction. The County Council continues to be supportive of the scheme as a means of achieving safe and convenient access to the new developments. Once funding becomes available, the County Council can allocate the necessary resource to review and progress the scheme design. The design will be developed as a complete package, and the traffic order required for the speed limit reduction will require a statutory consultation process. In the event that there is local growth fund money left over following delivery of the Maidstone integrated transport package, there will be scope for this board to consider whether it could be put towards the Harrietsham scheme. The County Council will also continue to explore other funding opportunities that could help to accelerate the delivery of this locally important scheme. Thank you.
I thought that was pretty clear, but Councillor Burton.
Again, very simply, it's an issue that we've been following jointly cross-party for some time. I'm very encouraged by what the officer has just said with regards to any remaining funding from the ITS package. I'd strongly urge that we keep a very close watching brief on this. And the two things, just to remind ourselves of, there is a suggested scheme. I think you'll get differences of opinion amongst residents, as you always will. But I think the thing to note is that we have confidence in the regular consultation that would take place before any such scheme is moved forward in reality. So that consultation will address that issue. But the other thing that I think is very important is that the scheme overall has a number of elements, and that the greatest saving and the most sensible delivery is if the scheme is delivered in one go. Tentatively, I think I was told that there was potentially the saving of maybe £250,000 by doing it in one go rather than two. And the development, each development element in time, will contribute its fair share to the overall cost. And it really just requires a bit of smart thinking on our part to be able to forward fund, knowing that the full reimbursement will come from development. So I'm encouraged by what I've heard today, but let's just bear in mind those two elements.
Happy? So there'll be a fairly clear précis of those words in the next minutes for the purposes of the member who brought that up initially. Agenda item 14 is our normal highway improvement schemes paper. It's for information, but if any members want to pick a hole in anything particular, we can do so. If not, oh, there he is again. There's our man. Off you go, Mr. Willis.
I've got leaflets to go and deliver as well, sorry, but I don't want to stop anyone else. But just about MA003070, which is the junction of our friend Hermitage Lane and the east of Hermitage Lane development, on page 31. As local members and I think as county members, we've now met with both land owners either side of that junction, and they're both kind of saying, over to you, as far as what's going to happen to that. There's a staggered junction being, just to give you an update, there's a staggered junction being put in place on Hermitage Lane. I think we've come to the conclusion that actually the proposal that's there is okay. The question is for KCC Highways. There's a filter lane in the middle of the road there which is used for lorries to turn into the Gallagher's site. With the development of the Crowdace Road, the east of Hermitage Lane Road that comes into it, so there's a staggered junction, if you can picture that. With the development of that road and the traffic lights, is that filter lane going to remain? Can I ask? The filter lane going north, south, that's right, yeah? Can you confirm it's going to remain?
Yes, it would remain.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 points, actually. First of all, on page 31, right at the bottom, there's a scheme, Borton Lane, which I understand is to do with the 220, the scheme for 220 houses on New Line Learning, and that has now been removed from the local plan, and it's also the developers have chosen not to fight the appeal, so I believe that will not be going ahead now. Also, I wanted to bring officers' attention to the second item on page 29. There were some amendments to a housing site in Cripple Street. The planning permission that was originally passed had a footway that went right the way across the road frontage. An amendment went forward that is now still being considered by Maidstone Borough Council. It's not had any opposition from Highways, but I did want to bring attention to the fact that the amendment only allows the pathway to go halfway across. It meets the road access into the site, and then it continues into the site. Now, I'd really like officers to consider giving some feedback to allow that footway to continue right the way across the site to the planning officer that's considering that case. If it would be unreasonable in the amendment to have the footway continue across, I wonder if the adoptions team could look at the possibility, when they're going forward with the adoption of the site, that they can have enough land in the frontage to allow for future footway provision.
Yeah, this is certainly a matter that can be picked up with our agreements team, who are obviously liaising with the developer on the Section 278 agreement. So we can take on board those points that you've raised as part of that dialogue.
Horton Lane?
Yeah, correct to say that the appeal has been withdrawn, so that could be removed from the list, absolutely.
We didn't rush, but it wasn't a heavy agenda. It was put out as an agenda so as we could clear up matters outstanding for the year. We'll meet again. When are we meeting next?
Good question.
Oh, you can buy those things, can you? Oh.
July.
12th of July is our next meeting. That will soon rush by. Thank you, everyone. See you all soon. Good.
Excellent chairing, by the way, as well, I think, to the chair. In difficult circumstances.